And we are live. We are recording. We're not live. We're alive, but we're not live. And we're recording. I'm glad you're able to join us again. It is another month. It is Onderstroom. I am Alex, the host, and this week I am speaking in English. I'm speaking with two comrades from Germany. And I thought it was very interesting. I was very happy to be able to do this collaboration. And so I hope you were able to follow, and maybe some people who don't speak Dutch can also follow along in this episode. I'm very eager to hear from them. They are the podcast Nächste Links, and to talk about some things about the far left political landscape, the challenges it faces in Germany, but also specifically in Hamburg, where these comrades are from. And I think this is very important for us. My podcast is normally in Dutch, and in the Netherlands we have a bit of a crisis about whether we are the 11th state of Germany or the 51st, 52nd state of the United States. And policy-wise, it's clearly the German one through its vicinity, its power, but politically or culturally, cognitively, it is absolutely the American has the advantage. And like Americans, we don't know anything about the countries around us. And so I'm very eager to be speaking with these German comrades. And I joke, but it's seriously, I think a lot of our comrades in the Netherlands really don't know that much about German movement, about French movements, Belgian maybe a little bit, but Germany can be a bit of a mystery. You drive through it and you speed really fast because you're allowed to, but you don't really know what goes on there. And therefore, I am super happy and super proud to do this crossover episode with Nächste Links with Timo and Vince. Guys, welcome. Welcome to Onderstroom.
Thanks for having us. Goedenavond.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's great to meet you and great to do also for us, it's the first time that we record anything in English. So this also goes out to our listeners because we will also release this episode in our feed. So yeah, if you're irritated, we are doing this in English now and the next episode will be in German again. But yeah, Alex, like you said, maybe it's great for people who don't speak German or Dutch to finally have an episode that they can listen to. And I mean, yeah, you said that the Netherlands maybe is like the 11th, I think you said, would be the 17th state of Germany, but you already lost this race to, but you lost the race to Mallorca nevertheless, so it doesn't really matter at all.
So the person speaking is my dear friend and comrade Vince. I'm Timo. And we're really glad to be on your show, and that we're now doing this.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and then also about your podcast?
Yeah, so we started this podcast I think 2 years ago now, and I think we're just like a left-wing podcast. We're just people talking about our political analysis, about the praxis and the experiences that we have, about not really, we are not like a daily, like a news show. So we are looking for topics that we're interested in. We are getting feedback from our listeners, from the community, and trying to work with that. But I think like the catch, or like the gist of it all is that I'm a Marxist and Timo's an anarchist, and so we try to do like a little bit of friendly ideological sparring and also providing some kind of, or promoting some kind of like left-wing unity at the moment.
Yes, we are publishing every 2 weeks, And as Vince said, we mostly talk about topics that we are interested in. There are some other projects in Germany that provide more like the daily news basis or go more into debates going on. We sometimes, of course, add to this, but we don't see other projects as a concurrence. You know, we want to add something with our podcast, and since we know each other for a longer time, we've been active together, we've been organized together, we want to share this with our listeners, and so we mostly speak to people in our age and some younger people, some younger activists. And as Vince said, the idea is also to say, hey, you don't have to agree always on everything, but you still can be organized together, and you can even be friends.
All right, nice. Very, very happy to be able to do this together. So for just you to give a general overview of like the situation of the far left and radicals in Germany, and then also in Hamburg specifically, and then we'll go into like some of the issues that the movement is facing, some of the challenges that you see, considering the far right, government repression, other stuff, and maybe we can see in what happens in Germany, maybe we can see some premonitions, maybe we can have some foresight into things that are waiting for us here in the Netherlands. And maybe you have some advice or some tips or some things that we can take with us in our organizing. I would look forward to that very much.
The good stuff. We do the good stuff.
So then, without further ado, let's just get into it.
Yes, please.
Yes. So for the listeners around the corner here in the Netherlands who have no idea what's going on in Germany, how do the far left in Germany in general? Its general strength and relevance, what does it look like?
I want to make a small disclaimer. We both are heartfelt activists, so maybe the next words we will use are maybe not sounding so nice, but we mean it in a solidarity and good way. But, and this is where we're coming to it, it's not looking so good.
Yeah.
So you have some very harsh criticisms and some fears and worries, and you're speaking also as like because you're also going to put it on your own podcast feed. So you also have these criticisms, but also towards your comrades, which you mean in a comradely, constructive way, but they are criticisms.
I would think so. And for me, I will just do like a quick start here. For me, it's not that much about criticism, but I think the situation is just bad. And it's not that like the left-wing people, the far left, is like too stupid or too lazy or something. It's just bad. It's like, I mean, the rest of Europe isn't looking that much better. So yeah. So the questions that you sent us before were, I think, a good possibility for us to do like some self-reflection and just look at the situation through an honest lens. And I think the far left in Germany is generally speaking in a historically bad spot. Like the multiple like crises of late stage capitalism are washing over us, and we don't really have like a great strategy or plan or anything going on. There's no vision at the moment or coherence amongst leftists regarding analysis or strategy. And I think depending on your definition of the far left, or like what you would consider the left, the moderate left, the far left, it's even worse, because even like the left-wing party, like the party Die Linke, which is not far left, but which is like social democrats in the original sense, even they are like historically low. They get historically low percentages at elections at the moment. So I think the current is just not. The history is not moving in our direction at the moment, and I think it's like a low point which came. There was a little high between 2008, 2012, 13, like in the wake of the financial crisis. There were some mobilizations, some hope going on, but it all got crushed by when far right parties took over the discourse and the public the public talk, so to speak, and really pushing like topics of migration, and the left had no answers. Basically, the only thing we had to say were like, yeah, open borders, but nobody gave a fuck. So they are at like 20 or 30% at the moment.
And I would add, we see a very shattered and in parts divided far left, but it's not defeated, and it's searching and learning still. So it's alive. It's not dead. And I want to give it to my comrades in this. And one of the notes was also like, yeah, weak but alive. So I think we got to give it at least to this, that we are not defeated yet, and searching and learning is part of the progress, but everything else Vince already said.
Okay, but so this is like an analysis of. Can you give us like a bit of a view of what does this look like? If we say like, okay, we start farther left than the Linke, then what are the players or the kinds of groups that you are likely to see? What does that far left landscape look like?
Yeah, so I think depending on your political compass, we can maybe start at the. Or I will start at the communist side of things, and then maybe Timo can take over for the anarchist scene at the moment. So historically, in the last like 20 to 30 years, there has been a domination of like post-autonomous groups. So they came out of the Autonome, like the autonomous currency in the 80s and 90s. And from there on, they developed a strategy which were more like oriented towards like the center of society. I would say it was some kind of taking over like some liberal talking points and like left-wing liberal talking points, like a lifestyle approach to politics, and they have dominated until I would say the 2010s, and
so.
Since then, we had
So you mentioned two things. You mentioned these autonomen and then post-autonomen. Is it possible to very shortly say like what are these autonomen and how are the post-autonomen coming out of that?
Yeah, I think the autonomen is what you also have in the Netherlands, like a connection between or like amalgamation between like squatters, anti-fascists, anti-imperialist groups, people who are very far removed from party politics and all that stuff, and also who really, I don't know, who tried to merge analysis and to merge analysis of the society and the politics of like the first person, so like a subjectivity approach to politics. And they focused very heavily on confrontations in the streets with the state. So I think that's like kind of a vulgar description, but that's more or less the thing. And since maybe the 90s, people were like, okay, that's not really working that well anymore. Like there are problems that we won't get to overcome with this approach. And then they came from this tradition. They had like this they weren't too fond on like communist party approaches to politics, like the groups you had before, but still they wanted to shed like this image of the like black bloc all hooded up burning stuff in the streets. And from there emerged the Interventionistische Linke, the EL, which was kind of a dominant group in far left circles and alliances in the last 20 to 30 years. But they lost a lot of their appeal, I would say. Maybe they would describe the situation otherwise. That's okay. But I think they lost a bit of it because the approach of merging left-wing liberal topics within radical analysis, but without like an antagonistic, I would say, without a really antagonistic approach to politics, is something that just doesn't work that well anymore. But yeah, so the Autonome was like the old like black bloc squatter people, and the post-Autonome came out of it in some parts they were the same people, but tried to make or to do like a broader appeal, to get a broader appeal for their politics. But yeah, so I would say just really quickly that these groups, they have been dominant for the last 20 to 30 years, like I said, but they are not that successful at the moment. Because I think history, just moved on. And so now I think we will come to that later, but at the moment there are other groups which are more like on the rise.
For more like anarchist structures, I can say anarchism has been always really weak in Germany for different reasons. Also, some arguing points with my Marxist friend here. No, we don't talk about this now. No, but anarchists are around in Germany. They are existent, but I think the spectrum of anarchist group is pretty wide. I mean, we all know that there's shitload of approaches to anarchism and views in this. And you have as many anarchist opinions as anarchists are there, if you want to say it like this. But they were always part of these groups. They were also taking part in autonomous and post-autonomous protests. They were always active in autonomous youth centers. So they have always been around, but they've never been like a power, like a unique power on the street. But we got to say, for example, in the last, I would say 10 years, we can see a rise of more like organized anarchist groups. Some have different approaches. Some are relying more on the traditional socialist roots of anarchism, and, propagating more like Mikhail Bakunin and Kropotkin. We still have a lot of more like individualist people out there. You find a lot of these in the ecological movement and the squatting of forests, for example. There they developed a lot of like important strategy or strategic tactics when it comes to militant actions, when it comes to blockades. So this is what came out of the autonomous movement. I would say they just developed like all these tactics. So more like the Propaganda der Tat, propagating through actions. And since a few years, we have like more anarchist communist groups also around, building platforms, organizing, more like approach on the working class as well, and more like, as I said, also rooting in the socialist traditions of anarchism. For me, it's really interesting to see. It's a very young leaf, it's a small, really, really small tree with some leaves on it, but it's growing. And maybe just to add, because Timo now talked about like the anarchist spectrum, and I would say that the tendency in the communist on the communist side of things is a bit similar, because for a long time you had people calling themselves like non-dogmatic leftists, open leftists, something like that. But now people are really like starting to call themselves communists again, or socialists, or anarchists. So I think the fracturing is also happening around along these lines. Just people are just saying, no, I want like a coherent analysis. There's this like being just some kind of leftist isn't enough for me anymore. I want to consider myself a communist, a socialist, an anarchist, whatever. So I think there's maybe in some kind there's more of a divide now than there have been 10 years ago.
Right. And so you see. So you're describing people want to have more of like a at least stated ideology, and for that something like for instance like I am a list does not feel like enough, and so there's a bit more of a filling in these ideas, but that also means that different people are going to fill them in a different way, and so there's a clearer distinct more. Okay.
I would think so, yeah.
So in the Netherlands, I have the feeling that like the far left is growing. Especially like this sort of like ideological far left. So like for instance, like a very big protest movement in the Netherlands is Extinction Rebellion, but they are not necessarily what I would call like a far left, right? A lot of the people in there, socialists and etc., and they're also in our movements, but as a whole, Extinction Rebellion is a bit different. But at the same time, also these theoretically far left organizations growing, right? And like you see that like in social media traction and in all sorts of mix arising, new groups coming up, and still we feel like we're probably not that strong within the country. I'm being very modest now, but I think we're not that strong yet, but we are growing. Is that similar for you guys?
I would say yes in some parts. So we now see a younger generation growing up and becoming politicized, some maybe through Extinction Rebellion, but most, for example, through Fridays for Future and then moving on. And at the same time, we see from the radical groups more open approaches again to reach out to people, especially to young people. So the tactics have shifted again. Like since in the 2010s, we had more like it was still like more isolated in some way, but at the same time they tried to open up the lifestyle, and now these groups are they try to do the concepts of getting in contact with them more open, for example, but at the same time also propagating different not only lifestyles but also political propaganda more. It's not so much lifestyle anymore. And I gotta say, for example, I also see a lot of tendencies for more authoritarian tendencies in some groups or like mindsets. I see this very critical as an anarchist or as an anti-authoritarian person, that I'm sometimes a little bit shocked how harsh these groups are in hierarchy and in the way they structure their groups. But this is interesting to see because, as I said in the beginning, it's moving, it's searching and learning. So there's a lot of movement within.
Very interesting. And if we talk about how specifically, so from a perspective, I think we tend to know very little about Germany in my experience. A few things I know is that Hamburg and Berlin are supposed to be strong left cities with strong movements and all sorts of stuff. And sometimes you'll see a St. Pauli team, and then those are the left-wing crew and the hooligan. They are a movement on rights, and so Hamburg can have this elan, this attitude, this sense of in Hamburg. The left is really strong, and I would just love to hear all about it. I would just love to hear all about Hamburg.
Yeah, so what you described is basically a myth, I would say. It's like a reputation that I wish that I could live in that city that you just described, but I just don't. So I'm from Hamburg. I was born here. I grew up here. So all my political work has been done in this city. Okay, firstly, I think what you have to understand if you are talking about Hamburg is that it's a town or a city with there are big like wealth disparities. So we have a lot of like really rich people. Like
the most rich people in Germany live in Hamburg.
The most, like I think a few years ago Hamburg was the city with the most millionaires in Europe. So or in the EU. So but there are also Hamburg is also like a harbor, like a port city, and has a long industrial tradition. So there has been class struggle and workers' movements in Hamburg from the onset of the working class movement from the 1850s onwards. So there and like from this resulting in a pretty strong communist party in the 20s and 30s. So there's like a more or less unbroken tradition of left-wing struggles in Hamburg. And also back then, like back in the 1920s, 1930s, Hamburg was one of the 3 or 4 strongholds of the Communist Party, of the working class movement in general in Germany. And so today, this tradition lives on. as we just saw with the strikes of the port workers, of the dockers, of the shipyard workers, which they have their own like fighting spirits and fighting traditions. Their strikes look a bit different than strikes from other workers, quite militant, I would say. But also Hamburg has like a liberal and like left-wing liberal tradition and reputation in Germany. So I think it's a bit like Berlin, but more wealthy and more like a bit more understatement, I would say. So not that over the top as Berlin. So a lot of people just come here because they want to live their like individuality, I would say. Many people come here like from the villages around, from smaller cities, to get like this free big city air going on. But the reputation that you talked about, like this whole like St. Pauli and in Hamburg like there are no fascists, the Red Hamburg, all that stuff. I think that was born in the 70s and 80s because there was a mixture of like these older working class communist whatever traditions. Then there was a lot of migration, migrant workers coming in with their own traditions of struggle, but also with their like cultures and traditions and all that stuff. And then there were a lot of alternative artists, alternative musicians. Hamburg was a big crystallization point of the punk scene in Germany, because also of the by being quite near to England and to London especially. So we had this melange going on, and then there were the squatters and other leftists, and they all like merged together in the city center, which was not gentrified then, in the neighborhood of St. Pauli and the surrounding areas. And I think that's where this myth basically comes from. And I think Hamburg was like this maybe until the 90s, early 2000s. And then the city government and the police just crushed it. And also they've just gentrified all the places that these people were meeting and gathering and building movements and all that stuff. But on the other hand, I would say there have been successful struggles in the past, mainly anti-fascist struggles in the 80s and early 90s. And as a result, you can not in all places, not in all parts of Hamburg, but you can more or less be like an openly left-wing person in most parts of the city, I would say, and not like getting attacked or getting in trouble for that, which is not normal in many German towns, cities. But still, on the other hand, you have a lot of neighborhoods or a lot of areas in Hamburg which are just like normal German neighborhoods. Like there is no difference between them and maybe some parts of Berlin or some parts of small cities or even like Bavaria or something. They're just people living there, just normal working class or petit bourgeois people living in their neighborhoods and not doing anything interesting or left wing.
No.
So yeah, but I think.
Would you say that in general the far left is relatively stronger in Hamburg than it is in the rest of Germany or in most places?
I would say that culturally, yes. So like you said, like you have these people with St. Pauli t-shirts, and you get like a lot of people wearing buttons and all that stuff. But I think culturally speaking, yes. And I mean, I'm speaking like from the privileged position of always having lived here. So I think if I would have come from another city, it would be a totally different story that I'm telling right now. But Timo wanted to say something.
I would say I live in Hamburg for 12 years now, so I come from Cologne, and I would say in Hamburg it's chic, it's trendy to be anti-fascist, to be Antifa, or to sometimes put up an Antifa sticker, or sometimes even visit anti-fascist demos. So yeah, as Vince said, there's this understanding, this culturally thing, which is on one side really good and interesting because it puts up the myth, the legend of the Red Hamburg, and on the other hand, it opened up spaces, but you have to have people to keep it up on a real way, and not talking like you're not real if you're not doing this and this, and I mean more like the practical way of you got to organize, you got to build structures, you got to defend places like squats. For example, for me, it was really inspiring to see the fights afterwards, of course, of the Hafenstraße, very famous squatting, and of course the Rote Flora. For the people who don't know, the Rote Flora is a very big, famous squat inside the city center of the Sternschanze, which is a neighborhood close to St. Pauli, and it's actually still squatted. So it's not like a legalized squat, so it's been a squat for over 30 years now. So mayors come and go, but the Rote Flora stays.
Yeah, interesting. So some things that you say remind me of the Dutch, especially of bigger cities like Utrecht and Amsterdam. Where, of course, it also had this squatting movement roughly around the same time, and this movement has become much smaller after the squatting ban was already over its peak and going down like in the 90s, and a lot of what we do now in the movement is working with things that come from that, working with that heritage, and also trying to grow beyond it in a way. But also, like, you have this history and this name for certain areas that comes from that image from then. Even so, in Hamburg, like recently, somewhere this century, I think it was like around 10 years ago, there was a big, what was it? Like a summit in Hamburg, and there was like this big coalition and a very large black bloc that made Dutch newspapers, which is rare for an activist thing happening in Germany. And I know like also a lot of Dutch people went there. And it was already like, oh yeah, but this time they're in Hamburg. What are they created in Hamburg?
I remember.
And it feels to me like something that might have been possible if it in München or something.
Yeah, for sure. Like Timo said, like we had the Hafenstraße and the Rote Flora, and I think there's just this myth or legend of Hamburg being this rebellious, resisting city full of squatters and militants and black blocs and all that stuff. And yeah, maybe for one weekend that was true. Like that was actually true. But I think, as always, like the grass is greener. Other just beyond the fence. So I think the summit that you spoke upon, like the G20 political and economical summit, it was like a last hurrah, in my opinion. It was like this last hurrah of a style of politics that's just not made for the 21st century in some parts, which I really don't want to be like, to be confrontational towards like comrades who struggled in the streets and who are facing repression still until this day because of it. Because like, of course we are in solidarity with them. But I think like from a broader perspective, it was big, undoubtedly, but it was a last stand of this kind of politics in Hamburg, I would say.
But I gotta give it to the people of the neighborhoods. We had like these summits in bigger and smaller cities all over Germany and Europe, and sometimes they put it up a mountain, sometimes they put it on an island, but this time it was in the middle of a city. It was close to St. Pauli, it was close to the Sternschanze, it was close to the alternative neighborhoods with a lot of leftists and also far left people, so the anger was absolutely right. The anger and the really not, what you have to do your fucking summits, which costs us just tax money we can use on skate parks for young people, or else, and you put it up in the middle of the city, like put the political part away and just think about the logistic fuck up of a very narrow inner city of Hamburg. Like, no, seriously, like people were annoyed and disturbed by helicopters, by police blockades in the streets. The trains were not running. You couldn't go through the city with the bike even. Like, it was just a big fuck up in the whole city. And then you have like all these assholes coming to our city. So I'm with Vince, but at the same time, you got to say people really try to speak up and say like this is not okay, and I'm glad that all the comrades from all over Europe came over. So if you listen to this, thank you for coming to Hamburg and having a big party with us.
Awesome. And so if we look at like the features, so you mentioned the Rote Flora. Are there some other features of like the political in Hamburg on the far left? Like, what does it look like? Does it have a character, or how does the far left look in Hamburg?
Well, we all wear these bags around our shoulders, so we can always recognize us as German activists.
No, but like for real, I think Hamburg had this more like alternative punky vibe in the 80s mainly, but I would say it's not that different from other parts, but I would say there's one big difference, which is tied into this like Hamburg myth, because you have these like left-wing liberal, and no, they're just left-wing people. They're not liberals. I don't want to denigrate them. Like left-leaning, mostly students, maybe people who went to the university and are now just working regular jobs, maybe even just regular workers, I don't know. And they come to demonstrations, and there is like a specific scene and optic and vibe that you get in Hamburg that I haven't really seen in other cities, of like this weird like soft left, culturally left-wing people who are into alternative culture, who are really like who are like really pissed off, for example, by this whole G20 thing. But they are not organized or anything. They just come to demonstrations. They vent their frustrations. They hate Nazis. Like I wouldn't doubt that. But so I think that's a very specific Hamburg thing. And then also I would say that at the moment Hamburg is gearing more towards like communist groups, like younger communist groups at the moment, which like I'm a fan of, but maybe other people are not. But at the moment, the communist side of like far left politics is dominating, which hasn't been like that in maybe 20 years ago, I would say.
And I would add that I would say like 10 years ago, it was very typical to come to a demonstration in a black rain jacket, and we had like all these blocks. I mean, looks quite similar in all over Germany, but Hamburg always had like its own style in it. But I want to give it to all the people out there that you can see influences from all over Europe and even other German cities, that people try to make demonstrations, for example, look different. For example, on the 1st of May, maybe not walk with a black block in the front, but open up the demonstrations, put up more banners with actually some political slogans on it, put up more flags, sing songs. So you see a development in the style as well. But of course, I mean, it's as we call it, scene. Blue jeans, black rain jacket, sports shoes like New Balance or Reebok, like these small hit bags, as you say. You recognize the leftists on the streets.
So the hip bag, the fanny bag sort of across one shoulder. Right?
Yes, exactly. I always get laughed about it when I come to the Netherlands. Like, look, there's the German.
Yeah, so I think that's what was going on, but I think also we are both in our 30s now, and I think younger generation approach things differently. So we for a long time we wanted to do a collaboration with maybe like younger comrades on the podcast on these topics, because I think we have our perspective, but we also don't recognize anything that's going everything that's going on. So I don't know, maybe younger people would characterize the city in a different way. But I think historically, the far left in Hamburg has made some inroads with like the cultural establishment in the city, and you see that like in the style of demonstrations. But on the other hand, there is this long tradition of militant confrontation in the streets, and people are still in some parts like living this tradition or trying to embrace it, I would say. Yeah.
And so it's, I think, often they're very critical on each other in like these radical circles. And so I see some of the points you're saying, like, oh, it's such a myth, it's overstated. But I would like to point out that from my perspective, still, like I see what you are saying about this myth and like that the problems. But if you tell me that there is a context where it's quite normal for people to say, of course we hate fascists, yeah, we'll go to the demo, we're not really organized, but you know, of course it's Hamburg. They're quite good, right? Like there's right, there's something to appreciate, I would say.
It is, and we give it to all the people as well, of course. And yes, as Vince said earlier, compared to some other towns, especially our countrysides in Germany, we are in a very privileged position still. We know from people we know, and maybe from parents or like from documents from the past, how big it was, and compared to some other stuff, it is still big, yes. And you're right, sometimes it's just a very critical point of view left people have on themselves and their own movement. I think in some parts, sometimes it's maybe too much, yes, but sometimes it's also important to not forget that there's a lot of work to be done, or there has to be a lot of work to be done to keep this up and to keep people coming to your organizations, to your demonstrations, to your actions, and get people into like the ideas of I mean, we don't do this for fun, right? We want a different world. We want some liberated society, and we want we want a good life for everyone. So this is nothing you do for fashion. If you're for the fashion, just leave.
Yeah, or stay. I don't have a problem. Like if people come into a movement for whatever reason, I don't really care. But maybe like putting on my little theory hat here. You can have all the like cultural hegemony that you like, but if you don't do anything with it, I think this is where the problem starts. And I think this is what I was aiming for, like with my point. I love that like the demonstrations against fascism are like big, like not big, but like big in Hamburg. Like there are hundreds of thousands of people showing up, and that's great. I love to live in a city that has a population like that. But what I was getting at was like, okay, but now what do you do? And I think, and this is not a criticism of anyone in particular, but I just think it's a bit sad that we don't, that there are no bigger movements from these like liberal left-wing people into the movement. And yeah, I mean, maybe some of them are like bougie, petit bourgeois people that you don't really want to organize with, or that don't fit your strategy, but not all of them. Many of them are just working class people that we have to organize. So I think it's like a laughing and the smiling, like a cry laugh situation. Well, I think many people in Hamburg have like this laugh and hate relationship with the city at the same time.
Yeah. So I've seen stickers even in the Netherlands. Local Antifa do not move to Berlin, and so does Hamburg have kind of the same position? Because I heard some things like saying, it's sometimes just nice to move to a place where it's easier to be leftist, to be
I think these stickers come from this thing that there were some tendencies in the past, I would say 15 years of Germany, that there were some hotspots. So some people moving to Hamburg, some people moving to Berlin, but then there was this big hype of Leipzig, what we called it Leipzig, where all the left, really loads of leftists moved to Leipzig and established a very militant and strong scene there. You maybe heard of it. Also a very interesting city, politically speaking. I think the thing with Berlin in Germany is also with the leftists that there's a big tendency for hedonism. You know, party, party, party. Sometimes going to a demonstration and then taking some cocaine. Yeah. Sarcasm aside. No, seriously, like people going to Berlin, and Berlin is a different vibe. We have about 2 million people living in Hamburg, and Berlin is like 3.4 million. It is a metropolitan, a world city. It's a different thing, and people go there for different reasons. Berlin has a really, really interesting history of left activism, of militant actions, and of course, historically with the divided. It was a divided city until the 1990s. Okay, but now I'm going too far. But what I want to say is, you see these stickers even in the Netherlands. That's pretty fun. It means that sometimes to do politics, it doesn't mean you have to go to a lifestyle city for it. It says, please stay where you are, because if everyone goes to Berlin, no one's in the countryside, no one's in the small towns, in the small cities. Yeah. And a lot of love goes out to all the countryside Antifa people holding it up, the struggle. So if you support your local Antifa, don't move to Berlin.
Yeah.
And if you move to Berlin, stay Antifa.
Yeah. Clear, nice. And so, a bit of a feel for the landscape in Germany and in Hamburg as well. And of course, we do occasionally hear things coming out of Germany here. We hear things about the far right, the AfD and other groups, and we hear about the government repression. We hear about anti-Deutsche people and sort of like pro-Israel stance, even in the far left, which is like comprehensible to people outside of Germany. So maybe we'll have a moment to talk about it later. But let's begin. Like what kind of issues do you for like the German far left? Like
Germany.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I think I mean the elephant in the room is the far right, of course. Like we don't get to talk about politics in 2024 without mentioning them, and I think it's a shame because in the end we are not mainly like anti-fascists. We are first and foremost we are anarchists or socialists or communists or whatever, and I don't really want to like get caught up in the struggle against fascism because it's just not fun, and you don't really win that much. You can only hope not to lose, I guess. But maybe starting locally in Hamburg, I think despite the liberal reputation of the city, there always has been like a presence of far right groups here, and especially in the 1980s, it was a big problem. So we had racist attacks, we had racist murders, quite a few of them. And we had the National Socialist Underground, the NSU, the right-wing terror group active in the 90s and 2000s. They killed like a shop owner out of racist motives in the 2000s in Hamburg. So, I mean, it's nothing new. And not that long ago, like 20 years ago, we had Roland Schill, who was this far-right judge. He was a judge in Hamburg, and he got voted into parliament with like 20%, and he more or less was AfD before there was an AfD. So his program was racism and law and order, and the conservatives, the CDU, the CDU, Christian Democrats, they collaborated with him. Like he was the second mayor of Hamburg. So I would say there is like this potential in Hamburg still, despite the liberal reputation. But it has grown so much worse in the last 10 years, I would say. It's just it's a different beast. I mean, we talked about it a bit before the recording, but in Germany, far-right activism has long been relegated to like gangs, young people, lifestyle Nazis. It was in the 80s and 90s. It was Nazi skins or boneheads, but they also evolved. But I think from 2013, 14, 15 onwards, it's a completely different beast. They basically got mainstream, and it really worked out for them. And Hamburg is is a city where they are not that strong, but they are pretty strong still. They come in between 10 and 15% in elections here, and that's a big problem, I would say. But I think, on the other hand, like I said before, in the 80s especially, and in the early 90s, there were some really successful struggles against open fascists in Hamburg. And we still, you mentioned that you still use the infrastructure from the squatting scene in the Netherlands, and we still rest like on the laurels of these people back then fighting the fascists, mainly in the city center. They just fought them with like physical violence, and they won in the end. And I'm not advocating for anything, obviously, but yeah, that worked out in the 80s. It won't work out today because they are just too big and too mainstream, and like the political situation is completely different. But yeah, I think Hamburg has a long tradition with the far right, but at the moment, it's just different. I think it's just different than before, or isn't it?
I agree partly. I would add that Hamburg, or the city of Hamburg, always offered a refuge and or logistic points for like intellectuals or like heads of the right-wing, far-right groups all over Germany. They became surprisingly good in organizing more the intellectual right all over Germany in the last 10 to 15 years, especially with the upcoming AfD, but also outside the AfD we have people who were like young Nazi boneheads or whatever activists when they were like 15 in the 19s, and they became like heads of the movement. And we have some of these people here, as Vince said, there were structures that supported the NSU terrorist group in Hamburg. So there's always been, they always found a spot in the city of Hamburg. So the streets were freed in some way, or were like fought back from the classic Nazis in the 80s and 90s. But I think what we face in all over Europe, and this is what we also can see in Germany, is a far right that goes into the heads of the people immediately. They don't need the street violence yet to dominate in a city. And I think this is what makes the classic anti-fascism so hard to engage with.
And do you think there's something how this happens in Germany? Because I think for my listeners, most people, an image of the media savvy Nazi podcaster, influencer, and this sort of connection to later cultural offensive with American figures like Jordan Peterson and Shapiro and all these kinds of people. Is it the same in Germany? Are there different?
I think they try to do that. Like we had this identitarian movement, they are pretty much still around, just under different names and in different functions. But I mean, Martin Sellner, the guy from Austria, who was the head of the identitarian movement there, and just quite the influencer, I would say. But so you had people trying to copy it, but I think. Okay, so I think Germany is just not cool enough. Germany has just this like very, I think it doesn't work that well here. Like all this like internet influencer, online influencer stuff from like fascists themselves, like hardcore fascists trying to do that. There were some people in Eastern Germany trying to do it, but that wasn't really that, I would say, successful, politically speaking. But what worked really well, and that's actually quite scary, is that they managed to influence other already existing cultural touch points, I would say, touchstones. For example, all this like MMA, free fighting, fight club scene, where they meet up, it's made up of like football hooligans, and then just people who are interested in martial arts, which I have nothing against actually, but but then like actual like Nazis, like fascists with the swastika tattooed to their chest, and they all mingle there, also with like young migrant men. So they just meet up and they are like, yeah, we are all bros, we all have like big muscles, and we fight. And I think that worked very well. And I think you can compare that to some other like cultural like bubbles, I would say. So there's like this gaming bubble where they try to make some inroads, and then maybe it's not like full on, like, yeah, we're like this Return with a V like Nazi influencer weirdo dorks, but it's like, yeah, I mean, come on, don't you also hate women and some stuff like this, and that works really, really well, especially with young boys and young men. And so I think there is like a parallel between like the online influencer scene between other parts of Europe or even the US and Germany. But I think you have to remember that Germany had like a fascist government, and there never was a denazification. It hasn't happened in the West, and sadly, as a communist, I have to admit it didn't really happen in the East. And they tried to, some people tried to do it, but it didn't happen. And especially in the West, like with NATO and all that, it really didn't happen. And there is an unbroken tradition, and I think that's the difference between Germany and other countries, especially the US. It's just a family tradition. Fascism is in some parts, in some way, just a family tradition. And if the right people come up and have the right talking points, people just come out of their holes, like for real.
And I would like to add something. I don't want to go too far in this topic, but I think it's really important for maybe your listeners in the Netherlands, because I don't know if this is coming up on the newspaper. There's this saying, people in Germany like to listen to true crime podcasts, but they don't care what the true crimes of their family was. And and speaking of these family structures, the traditions we have in Germany in this, recently in the last years, the government somehow and the police and the Secret Service people, they somehow managed to discover more and more groups that are integrated in the German system of governments and institutions. So we have people from the army, we have people from police, preparing for day X. They gather ammunition, they steal ammunition from the army, they steal weapons from the army and the police, tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of ammunition. We're speaking of people preparing for street fighting. We speak of people preparing with lists with names of politicians they want to kidnap first. There is a group, they already ordered bags for corpses.
Yes, this is in the Netherlands as well, yes.
Okay, good. So that's the next level we discover now more and more. I mean, Antifa research is showing this for decades now. But now we see the far right in Germany and in Europe, but especially in Germany, they are armed, they are trained, and they are ready to kill. And this is no fun. And so all these liberals always like, oh, violence is no option. Yeah, but for these people, it's an option, and they will use it.
I always like this. So this is a dreadful story. The news when it hit me, like these stashes with weapons and body bags being found, and also with this German. I think it was CDU, but he was relatively positive towards migrants, or something.
Yeah,
Walter Lübcke, yes.
And I'm almost of Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, where King Theoden is awoken, and they're talking about all the orc clans, and Aragorn is sitting in front of him, and he says, "I won't risk violence," and Aragorn says, "What violence is upon you, whether you would risk it or not?"
Yeah, I can really just agree with you, and also with Timo there. Like, violence has chosen you. Like, it's not. I mean, it's not. I really think it's a problem that we have to face, or that we have to grapple with. But I think focusing like on these like dreadful projections for this day X is it can result in like doom scrolling and just doomerism as a whole. And I don't really think that's for me. This is like scary, and this is like crazy talk. But I think the bigger problem is like the ideological battle, and they have won on that front, for me, like surprisingly fast. Like the issue of migration really they really played that well. I have to admit, like they saw what was going on, and they just spun like a shitload of like stories and lies and all that stuff. But they saw, okay, yeah, people are like in the moment they are like struggling, maybe economically or just like mentally. I would say, with the multiple crises that we lived through in our lifetime, and they gave them like an easy answer, and it really worked out. And I think there is like a toxic mixture of racism and like sexism, but more like anti-feminism, I would say. And then like paired with a specific kind of German nationalism. Like a really specific kind, which is like, okay, we were like, okay, yeah, maybe we fucked up like 80, 90 years ago, but we like really paid the price, and now we want to be proud again. We don't want to be like there's a feeling amongst German nationalists that they are like the only nationalists who can't express their like national pride. And I think like the combination of all these things really worked out for them like quite well. And yeah, so I think this is like on the ideological front, like not speaking about like body bags and I don't know, quicklime and stuff. But like the ideological.
I think it's important, the point you raise. Like you want to be. It's about the struggle of ideas. That's also very important, but it's also more boring in a way.
Yeah.
And it's important not to lose sight of it, because so often we within our movements we don't care about it. We care about the flashy actions and the risk of this confrontation, or these dangers and these very immediate high profile sort of, this thing is going to get us, where often these very structural things are driving these things and are more important.
Maybe they are more important. Maybe I don't know, like maybe not. Like if you're living in some Eastern German village and like Nazis are beating you up every day, I can understand that you say, okay, no, the violence is like the most important thing. But yeah, I think you're right. We have to talk about that, and maybe like as a personal example for this like day X thing, when like COVID hit and it seemed like, okay, maybe things like shit was literally hitting the fan. I ventured out and got some I got into prepping like for a few weeks or for a few months, and then now all that stuff is lying in my attic, and I never used it. But I think I had like a lot of ideological discussions since then, and I had to use my brain there. Yeah.
Shout out to Margaret Killjoy.
Yeah, shout out to Margaret Killjoy on that front.
Oh yes.
I would like to.
I hope she this. Hi, Margaret.
And I would
absolutely.
Since we have like talked about all these intense, dangerous right-wing things, I would also want to make a small step back from it and add something which is maybe also comparable to the Netherlands right now, because when we look at the Netherlands, we sometimes receive a more like liberal society, which is still strange because there's some kind of king and there's a holiday on the king's birthday. Like I don't know, man. But okay, let's deal with it. No, and I think in Germany we say as radical leftists and anti-fascists, we say it didn't start with the gas chambers. It started with the people agreeing to what's happening, and you don't need to be a fascist already to agree to it. And what we also see right now, and this is what would be really interesting to hear from your side, from the Netherlands, is we see a lot of liberal people taking over the talking points of the far right, and they sometimes even call themselves kind of left or left liberal or even anti-fascist or whatever. But we have like people doing podcasts, doing shows, doing TV shows, and they do like a big job for the far right because they just want to the liberal approach, like the political and ideological approach of liberalism and especially neoliberalism, is a door opener for fascism in Germany. It was before and it is right now. And so I also think it's very important for far right, for far left, if you talk about the far right, to see that all these structures that are already there. I mean, the people already preparing with weapons and body bags and stuff, you don't have to make a discussion with these people.
No.
But there are even more liberal people who think they are on the question marks good side of the history, but they aren't, because they have bad analysis. They have like very bourgeois thoughts of economics and social struggles in society, and
Yeah.
I think this is also very dangerous, because these people they do more damage than some people would like to admit. And
So I find-
right
I find
now
this
I see
interesting.
some
I see it-
influencers in this. Sorry, yeah.
No. So I find it very interesting. I think what you say, like this analysis, that is very, very problematic. I think people are naive about how their platform affects politics, and how when you say something and you express an opinion, how that is a political act. And the idea about like the sort of the free market of ideas kind of situation, and say like, oh, there is just this new interesting right-wing idea, and I'm just going to talk about it because and it's all the rage, and I'm just going to talk. But you give this platform, either not caring or not considering that by doing that you are giving resources, you are giving power, and also you are letting the hype that something else created in favor of this far right, you are letting it influence you to make it snowball further, for instance. And this is even very light, right? This is not people like taking over the talking points themselves. But this is like the well-willing people who are saying like, it's just interesting and I'm just going to talk about it. Next to like newspapers, big commercial, also public media conglomerates that are just make space for our right, and often like staggeringly like 3 or 4 times more than for other ideological bases, right? Like they don't, like even if you say, they're obviously not going to invite radicals, but like moderate left often gets like a quarter of the time, of the quotes, of the words spoken than the far right does in the interviews and everything.
I think it's the same here, and it's driven by outrage, obviously. But like moving on from this, I would because it's a point that we discuss here, like in here with here I mean in Germany, like in the German far left, for a long time now, or it has made like inroads into the thinking of people, because I think for a long time we did what is now considered Feuerwehrpolitik, like firefighting, basically. So okay, you see a fascist, you go there, you try to in some way disturb or confront them.
Yeah.
And people
Yeah. So there's a big fire truck there, and you have to do something with this short-term immediate that is pulling your attention, and so you are reactive. You are reacting and you are in panic because the building is on fire, but what you are not doing is and letting your own what you do.
I think that's like a fair characterization of this style of politics, and I think it's I can understand why people do it, because people just work like this. Like it's a question of like focus and capacities and all that stuff. But I think people came around to the conclusion that maybe in some instances this is just necessary, but like it doesn't work as a strategy. And I think what's going on at the moment is that many people, regardless of their like current of leftist thinking, are saying no, like the best anti-fascism actually is like class war and class struggle, and like focusing on social issues, on class issues, and just trying to get people to mobilize people to fight for their own interests and to fight for their like collective interests as a class, and not like individual interests or in their national interests, so called. So I think that's that's what's going on, and people are still like trying to figure out how to do it exactly. For example, there are collaborations between like the climate justice movement and trade unions. So they try to like get just connections there, or anti-fascist groups who are trying to support like striking workers, like picket lines, all that stuff. And I think that's great. I actually think that's a good idea. And if we are talking about like what is like a positive development in the German far left, and this is happening in Hamburg, but it's also happening in other places, people are coming around to the idea of organizing locally and trying to like act on the issues that people around them are like really facing, like real issues, like not that like you can really do a hierarchy of issues, but I think many people try to focus on like the most radical, the most interesting, the biggest issue that they can find. And if you want to really build a movement that has a strong base, you have to take issues that the regular people, the working class people in your area care about, and that afflict them. Bread and butter politics, yeah. So in Germany, it's this is the debate around like Basisarbeit, or like base work, would be the direct translation. And I think that's great. Like that's really great. And people are doing it like on the anarchist side, people are doing it on the communist side, on the non-dogmatic side, doesn't really matter. But it's more of a strategic discussion, and just not going out like in full like black bloc attire, just looking for like fascist stickers every day that you can cross with your own stickers or something. Like that's nice, but that's not really like political praxis in a like with a long-term thinking, I would say. So I think all these discussions about like working in the neighborhood, working in your working place is great, but and I think that's the discussion at the moment. The question is, okay, but how do we connect? Like, how do we connect all these local initiatives and all these local groups on a bigger scale? And that's a political discussion. I think, like, between anarchism and communism, there would be a big debate there.
Probably.
But this is very interesting. And it's good also to hear tone and a positive development. I have a candidate in view that I maybe want to talk quickly about this type of localizing that you mentioned. So it's nice to have a little sneak peek for a possible future episode. You also mentioned government repression.
Yes.
Particularly in Germany.
Yes. I think it's also important that we go into that a little bit, at least. So we just talked about firefighting politics. We talked about anti-fascism and all this stuff. So what we also see, besides these new strategies of getting people into politics and stuff like this, we see, I don't call it a backlash, but we see another small rise of people going back to the classic just beat 'em up tactics. And we all heard about what maybe happened in Budapest. We heard about maybe the case of Lina in Germany. So for the people who don't know what happened, Lina was a prisoner, a political prisoner. She's a comrade, and she was accused, and some other comrades, of strategically attacking neo-Nazi infrastructure and people, especially in East Germany. The Budapest thing is that in Budapest happened this Day of Honor, this disgusting thing that is actually financed by EU money. And people who went there in open fascist clothes got beaten up by some people, and some people got arrested. And in Germany, I mean, we have a so-called social democrat and green government, but the repression against left wings and especially against anti-fascist structures is on a rise. We have it in Germany, we have it in Hamburg, for example, against groups like Roter Aufbau. They were called like an organized criminal organization. We had the case of the three of the park bench. There was a case against 3 anarchists in Hamburg that were accused of some planning of arson attacks. And there was also a trial on a case called 129A, which is a justice case of forming a terrorist organization. So and at the same time we see public, how do you say, Fahndung?
Putting out like how do you call them?
Pictures. They just put out pictures of people they are looking for, like on big screens all over Germany. And we didn't even have this to the times of RAF.
Yeah.
So we face a repression which is insanely intense, aggressive. They kick down doors, and especially in cities of Leipzig and Berlin. I think every weekend we had this case of an anarchist library in Berlin connected to some people in Greece. They wanted to make an European terrorist case out of it. But we always come back to Germany in these things, and people are facing years of trial and years of prison and big financial problems here. So yeah, sorry.
And I also wanted to mention that in the south of Germany there have been also some big cases against like people who just tried to get like far right people out of like the working class, the union movement. So the far right wanted to infiltrate there, and people just stopped them and got thrown into prison for their actions.
And is this about them trying to do this like in a legal sort of way, saying this is not okay and the union be out of this, or is this a confrontation situation?
Nah, not really. No. No. It's about like they are accused of hitting them in the head, basically. But it's like any means necessary and all that good stuff. But no, I think the repression, the level of repression really got amped up. There are discussions about like the why and the how and all that, but from my perspective, I think like this authoritarian model or the combination of a liberal ideology with an authoritarian model of statehood is being done in Germany at the moment, and I think we can't really talk about repression in Germany without mentioning that there are people in prison like from the left-wing German groups, but there are more people still in prison from the Turkish and the Kurdish movements, like comrades from PKK, comrades from DSKPG, from other Turkish communist groups mainly.
Or just in general, communist Kurdish comrades that are accused of whatever the state makes up. Like seriously, they just make up stuff and just imprison people.
So,
sometimes for just playing music in the fucking streets.
So if you are talking about repression in Germany, I think you have to mention that also. And as always, like the state tries its tactics on like the weakest or the people that can't really or that don't have that big of a social base.
And it's had nothing to do that we sell drugs. I want to say we sell weapons to Turkey.
No, Germany is one of the biggest weapon exporter. But and also, I think what happened in Hamburg, especially in Germany, all over the country, but in Hamburg especially, was when the demonstrations in solidarity with Palestine like got bigger or like got started after last in the last October and November. They really cracked down on them, and I think the repression against like migrant comrades is like a really, really big topic or big problem in Hamburg or in Germany at the moment.
Very sad about this massive repression, and very interesting that these migrant communities are targeted even more. I would like to talk about something that you are maybe not super excited about, so we can keep it short. Recently, of course, we saw that there's this storm of violence going on in occupied Palestine, following the Hamas attacks in October, and in the Netherlands and much throughout the world, revolutionaries are trying to support Palestine, and sometimes you of like anti-fascist or left-wing demonstrations in Germany that have pro-Israel flags, and this is unknown to us. Of course, like anti-Semitism is something that is bad, and we hate anti-Semitism on the left. But the state of Israel is not all Jewish people, and criticism of this is not anti-Semitic. But in Germany, there seems to be some leftists who have a different idea about this. Can you talk a little bit about that, just very shortly?
Yes, we can. Before we do, for all the people who understand German, I would really recommend the episode about Anti-Deutsche of the podcast called Übertage, because they talk to an activist who was involved in the development of this movement and these ideas in the 90s. So if you speak German or you're able to understand, really look into it, because it's interesting historically speaking, just as a small disclaimer, because this is pretty cool actually to know where this is coming from, because I think it would be too much to talk about this right now, to explain why it was developed, where it was coming from, why is it called Anti-Deutsche, etc., etc. But we will try our best now to wrap it up.
I can just second the recommendation. The episode is really good, but I would say that, okay, so since the 90s, maybe there were some like progenitors in the 80s, but mainly like since the 90s, there has been this current of Anti-Deutsche, which if you translate it directly would be anti-German, which is, don't get me started on the name, it's not really that, but in fact, or like in effect, these are nominally left-wing people. Some of them I would consider left-wing on a lot of other topics. Like I wouldn't say, okay, these are not leftists, because I think that's just simplifying. But people who consider themselves leftists, often Marxists, but also sometimes anarchists, which is generally speaking even weirder. But nevertheless, they consider themselves to be in solidarity with the state of Israel, because in their argumentation, and I think this is like the base argumentation, there are a lot of different anti-Deutsche people who hate themselves. I mean, left-wing infighting also is a big topic for them, but generally speaking, they consider the state of Israel to be like a necessary safe space, safe room, whatever, defending room for Jewish people all over the world. And this comes directly from from a specific analysis of like fascism in Germany and the Shoah, the Holocaust, all that. So that I would say is like the very, very short answer. And there have been like a few peaks. There was a peak in the 90s after the German reunification or the annexation of the GDR or whatever you want to call it. Because people then were like afraid that Germany would become this great power again, and they had the historic, historically speaking, they were afraid of like this Fourth Reich, like the Fourth Empire of Germany, and then that like more or less merged with aversion to the first and especially the second Intifada in occupied Palestine. So I think historically speaking, there was like a peak in the 90s and a peak in the early 2000s, around like 9/11, the second Intifada, and especially the Iraq War. Like there was a big discussion about, I mean, if you can believe it or not, but like some like hardline anti-Deutsche support like the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan,
Really?
especially Iraq. On the basis of, like these are like, I don't know, like Arab barbarians that we have to civilize from a Western perspective.
Wow.
But this all, but so you had like people running around with like Antifa badges where one flag was the US flag and one flag was the Israel flag, which, I mean, it's absurd, but I saw it with like my own eyes. So it sounds like this like old geezer rambling, but you know what I mean.
Wow.
There are videos of demonstrations of Anti-Deutsche where they have the flags on cars, on the trucks, on the demonstrations and stuff like this.
Yeah, so that's what was going on, and then it all died down a bit. I would say it all got like, it fizzled out and was not that big of a topic. And then when the situation in Palestine got worse, like in 2014, and then again like 2018, 19, and then again, and of course like now, the war going on now, or the massacres and the just the fighting going on at the moment. So I think that every time like the situation in Palestine and Israel escalates, these people are popping up again and again and again, and they more or less align with the official view of the German state, which is to say solidarity with Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Israel is the official like line, the state position.
Yeah.
The position of the state is we are in solidarity with Israel because of the history of the Holocaust.
Nevertheless, of the government, for example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Regardless of the government, like regardless of if it's like a in parentheses left wing or right wing government in Israel, doesn't really matter. It's like a thing of principles, unconditional solidarity, and these anti-Deutsche people are basically on the same line on that topic, and yeah, I think that's. It doesn't really explain it because I have been to a lot of countries and talked to a lot of different activists, left-wing comrades, all that, all these good people, and never really could explain like why there are anti-Deutsche, because I know that it seems so strange from the outside. It's really weird. It's like I think many countries have like these weird, I don't know, idiosyncratic beliefs that some fringe leftists believe in some countries, or not even leftists, like just groups believe in, and it's really different or difficult to explain it without giving like a full-on speech or like full-on lecture.
Would you say it is fringe? Because you use the word fringe now, and I've heard that it's less prominent, this anti-Deutsche is less prominent in Hamburg than elsewhere, so maybe this is a situational thing, but I've heard of social centers being taken over by anti-Deutsche people, like big leftist web shops and distribution centers banning all things with Palestine. I've heard like big organizations involved in internationals that everybody else in the international supports Palestine, but the German group has like even a ban on associating with groups that support BDS within Germany, and like, but it's being quite about bigger organizations as well.
Yeah, so just I want to give it to Timo, but just as a correction there, or I have to correct myself, or maybe it got lost in translation. No, the anti-Deutsche people are, for me, they are fringe because I consider the belief like strange, but they are not. Yeah. But they are not. Maybe it's like the wrong word for it, but they are not fringe in like if we are talking numbers. Especially in the circles of people who are active for a longer time, or like who are really activists, they are really not fringe, or they are not a small minority, and especially in Hamburg. I don't want to go too far into detail, but Hamburg is one of the strongholds of the anti-Deutsche movement. Yeah, not of like the hardcore anti-Deutsche, I would say, but there's like this like subcurrent running through a lot of discussions where some beliefs that started in these groups are then taken on by a lot of different groups which would never consider themselves to be anti-Deutsche, but who are influenced by them. And yeah, so I think that's the situation in Hamburg. So it's not like the stronghold, but it plays a role. You can't deny it. Like it's not. Yeah.
So, and I would like to add to what Vince already said is. Maybe it helps to understand a bit more. The anti-Deutsche movement started as an intellectual movement as well. They were putting a lot of effort in theory, especially also on what Vince already said, but also on anti-Semitism, focusing anti-Semitism in leftist structures. And so, of course, they have an influence. So, of course, it is there because they put up a lot of discussions, and I gotta say, they put up some important discussions as well back in the 90s, because leftist Germans were not really talking about anti-Semitism in their own structures, and this is not about being in solidarity with Palestine, but in general, like there was a problem with
Yeah.
it, indeed. And we have still some leftist or like some especially red groups in Germany which are still have a structural problem with the anti-Semitism. Just to say
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah.
But what happened to this anti-Deutsche movement is that they stayed at the universities. Of course, there were like in the 2000s these demonstrations where they were the people who run the demonstrations and people joined them. And you have like there was a demonstration in Leipzig a few months ago with like 600 people demonstrating with Israel flags on the streets. But they never managed to build up a whole movement on the street. So this is also important to know. Which doesn't mean that they were not happening on the street. Of course they were happening. When I moved to Hamburg 12 years ago, just a few months before I came here, there were like some fights actually in the streets and people were fighting each other. So, which is pretty sad, I think. So the impact is there and it's important not to totally ignore it, but we also don't want to make it bigger as it is, because we were, I think I can speak for us both, positively surprised how many people in our surroundings, our comrades, our friends were actually seeing the situation in Palestine, Israel right now differently than maybe 10 years back, or even contrary to the positions of Anti-Deutsche. I somehow managed to go between these two lines of anti-imperialism and anti-Deutsche in my political socialization. I don't know how I did it, but it just never, like, both sides never really, like, touched me that much. And then I just was interested in how to understand it. And this is why I said, like, hey, listen to maybe some episodes of other podcasts or try to understand it, because I'm tired of just bashing these people.
But
it shouldn't be about it. But sorry, to add it, but it is really important to call out their theoretical failures, their wrong analysis, and their also inhumane points of view they have sometimes.
And I think that's what is the problem at the moment, because for a long time you could kind of ignore it, like Timo said. Like, I mean, I don't want to use this term, but like normal people, like in the left, I think most people like on the left, they for a long time they were like, yeah, don't get me started on this issue. Like, it leads to nothing. It's just stupid. Like, let's not talk about it. And I think that's in some kind that's a valid approach. But now that the situation, like now you don't have to be focused in your own organization on the issue of Palestine or Israel, because to care about it, because it's global news. It's like everyday news. Like, you can't ignore it. You cannot not take a stand, I would say. And I think many people tried to not take a stand for a long time, because it was just like this like never ending fucked up discussion that led to nowhere. But now I think there is the tendency of like, yeah, crystallizing positions. People do take a stand and fights do happen. And yeah, like Timo said, I think you can't really support the state of Israel like committing war crimes and all that and still call yourself a leftist. It just doesn't work in my head, at least. But it's not. I think when people from other countries or like comrades from other areas think about anti-Deutsche people, they are like, they think about them like as a closed block, like as this like organization that enters into left-wing spaces and tries to do this and that and all that. No, like it's a current. It's like people are like maybe 80 or 90% like on your line, and then they also weirdly support Israel. Like, this happens. This is not like it's not like a closed off situation. So it's, yeah.
I would like to add a personal rant and maybe to end this. But the thing is, there is a thing called Germany with a history, and we got to take it seriously. And the Shoah happened here and not elsewhere. And this is true. But what annoys me so much on these anti-Deutsche people and the power they have in the discussions or the ideas of these people in these discussions is that they take away the discussions of anti-Semitism and the actual danger for Jewish people still in Germany. The danger was never gone. And they take away this discussion and put it in the places of Israel and Palestine, instead of looking in our front door that Jewish people are not safe. We read about on social media of leftist Jewish people saying we don't feel safe in Germany anymore, and we gotta take this serious as leftist people. This is no fun. But at the same time, this racism is increasing, and we see people from the migrant communities, from the Muslim communities, we see people from Palestine, leftists from Kurdish communities, together with people from the Jewish communities talking together. And then we see these white ass people making decisions about who's anti-Semitic and who's not. And this is just not okay. Talk to the people. The Jewish communities have a very, very different point of view on a lot of these things, but no one's listening to them. And I think this is a great mistake these people do. And this is a great mistake a lot of other leftist people run into, that they just think, hey, we need to take a stand with Israel or not. No. Take a stand with the people. Take a stand with the Jewish communities. Look out for your synagogue if this is getting attacked. Look out for your mosque. Look out for your neighbors. We need to discuss this thing, anti-Semitism and the racism against Muslim people and the hate against Palestine people. It's also happening here. It's not only happening there. And this is what annoys me so much on it. Sorry, I got a little angry in this. No, really, like seriously, like when I read that a person, I think he's a leftist leftist Jewish person in Germany, and he's telling me on social media, like, I'm afraid to stay in this country, then I feel ashamed. And then I don't want to end up in this discussions what's happening thousands of kilometers away. I can take a stand there, yes, but I also have to look what's happening actually in front of my fucking door.
And this is, of course, like,
I'm done.
And anti-Semitism is real and also a problem. And this is, go on.
And I want to make clear, I'm sorry, no. No, I didn't want to say, like, it's not. It is important to show solidarity with Palestine people.
Yes.
But it's also important to show solidarity with the Jewish people and take the importance of history serious and take a lesson from this and stop being up with your nose in your own ass. This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you. And I think that's a beautiful end to this segment. We've been at it quite a while. We've had a tough ride, and I had an adventure. I was wondering, in closing, are there any? You mentioned already this sort of like this basis local work, but are there other hopes or ideas or promising developments that you see German on the Hamburgian far left, or further out in Europe or elsewhere in the world? What light do you see? Where do you see promise?
I think what for me is the most hopeful thing, or what gives me the most hope, is like, I mean, it's like every generation, like the youth is what gives me hope, like the people who are coming after us, who are like learn from our mistake, who just generally are doing it better. And I think what is a great development in the German left at the moment is like this return to like class-based analysis. When I was organizing for the first time in my life, like when I was like 18, 19 years old, there were people in the room like considering themselves to be leftists, maybe even revolutionaries, I don't know, who said, no, like the class struggle is a thing of the past. Like the working class is no more. Like this is not what we should be focusing on. This is not our approach. And this has vanished, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has come back. The class-based analysis has made a comeback, and maybe we are not there yet in terms of organizations, in terms of the approach, in terms of like all the strategies and all that. But we can figure this out, like why we are at it. But I think just the baseline of having like a class-based analysis of society is finally back, and it's not only back, it's like it has become self-explanatory for a lot of organized people that this is what they are basing their approach to politics on. And I think that really, really gives me hope, because I have seen like an influx in people just coming into the movement who are not from the universities, who are like working in some, I don't know, workshop or as some kind of service worker. And there has been a tick up of strikes, of struggles in the workplace, especially amongst young workers, but also amongst like the more traditional trade union movement. And I think the links, the connections that are forming between radical groups, younger, newer, upstart unions, and like base union, basic democratic unions, and like the traditional workers' unions movement is great. Like this is like really great. This is what I'm putting a lot of my hope into, and this is connected with like the space work tendency, just to be like in your workplace, in your neighborhood, all that stuff. And then I think on the other hand, I think migration it's a theme for the right, but it's also a theme for the left. And like people are coming to Germany if they want or not. It's just an economic necessity, and it's a part of the global society we are living in. And I think that many of these people, like these comrades in parts, are bringing good ideas, and are bringing a necessary, like an earnest approach to politics. For them, politics is no fun. Like for like people in Germany for a long time, I think politics is like you start at 18, you end at maybe 28 or 30, and then you are done with it. And then if people are coming and they tell you, yeah, we fought like our oppressors, we came here like, I don't know, by a boat, or we swam across some like seas and all that stuff, and you are sitting there and you're like, okay, yeah, maybe politics is not about like having fun or going like to a rave after a demonstration, but maybe it's about fighting and struggling and fighting for a better world. And I think just the combination of a class-based analysis, and also people who are coming here with their own different and maybe in some parts more like earnest approach to politics is something that we can build up upon, or we can build up from. And I think lastly, even though it's in some parts it's there have been like a liberal shift, I think the feminist movement is growing, and that's a great thing. And especially now, people in like the feminist movement and in the anti-racist movement are basing also like their own analysis and approaches to politics on like this class-based approach, or on this like on these socialist more or less, or non-actual socialist analyses and strategies. And that's great. I think that's a good thing that's happening, and I have a lot of hope in that. But I must say, maybe in some parts we have to be faster than we are at the moment, because I think none of us in Germany at the moment know how long we will be able to do our politics here in the open.
I see a lot of hope, or it gives me hope when I see the young people, when I see Gen Z getting into politics at a young age, even younger than I was. I see the queer kids embracing their identities, but also already mixing it up with some class struggle at some point. I see it in the ecological movement, people gaining a lot of skills. Since I'm a big fan of practical actions, I think it's nice that people do skill sharing still, and learning how to squat a forest and build a tree house, and that people are still eager to experience new things and to look out how life could be, maybe. I mean, we have like all these these studies about what people, how many hours people want to work and stuff like this. And then people say like, oh, Gen Z is just lazy. And I'm like, no, they just realized that capitalism sucks. So yeah, let's go for it. Let's build another world. So this gives me hope, and this is nice. And I really would like to play a part in this and watch these people and support these people in the next decades. And I think moments like these also give me hope. You and I and Vince sitting in front of the computer, connecting through borders and countries and just talking to each other, that more and more people start actually talking and are interested in the people around them and the people they do the politics with. As Vince said, it shouldn't be a hobby. It's a struggle, it's a fight, but it's also a nice thing we can do in solidarity with our comrades, longing for another society. And this is something beautiful we should find power and energy in to keep on fighting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. And the feeling is mutual. This sort of general overview of this German situation that we've talked about has brought up a lot of practical issues and views on behave. How do we think together? How do we solve problems? How do we recognize problems? And I mean, this has been a very inspiring. I would love to continue with or without a microphone. And so for the people at home, enjoyed it as well. Whether you are tuning into Nächste Links or and I hope you you get something out of it. Let me know what you thought. Like, share, subscribe. Throw this podcast in liquid form at anyone who you feel needs to hear about us. And as always, see you next month when the Dutch government lets you know when my podcast comes out, which it does. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and goodbye from our side. It was a pleasure, and I hope that we can return the favor and have you on as a guest in the future.
That would be lovely.
It is. So you did stop the recording?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Because in the end of every episode, I think it's just for us it's just tradition. I mean, we are on your feed, so but if you want to hear us and if you want to listen to us, you can find us on Spotify. You can find us everywhere. You can find podcasts. We have managed to move to Apple Music a few months ago, actually. So yeah, tap on the shoulders for us. You can support us on Ko-fi by donating once or regularly. We will give you a shout out if there's some money coming in. And if you go to our Instagram page, Nächste Links, you can find the link tree there with all the relevant links, our email, all that stuff. So if you are from the Netherlands or if you are from Germany and you want to criticize us or you want to, I don't know how you say it in English, if you liked what we said here and you want to let us know, then get in touch. We highly recommend doing that. And give us a follow and give Alex a follow because his project is great. And I think we think it would be great if we could generate like this more like European sphere of like left-wing media projects, I guess.
Yes, please. And Alex, can people donate to you, by the way?
I have not set up anything for it. I've been considering it, but I thought I'm such a... if I do, I will let people know.
Okay.
But as of yet, not really.
Okay, but still, people like and subscribe Alex podcast. It was a really nice evening with you, and looking forward to see and hear you again in first and second live.
And sorry for maybe the terrible English, but we gave our best.
You were German. You have to say this. You were fine.
Yeah.
All right. I'm turning it off.